and welcome to the Research Works podcast, brought to you in association with Curtin University and the Healthy Strides Foundation. Your hosts are Dr. Dana Poole and Dr. Ashley Thornton, and together we will interview world-leading researchers in the area of child health to support your practice in being more evidence-based.
The team at the Research Works podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which we live and work. We pay our respects to all First Nations peoples, elders past and present, and would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast each week, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We recognise their continued connection to this beautiful budja we call home.
Hello, everyone. We have now completed 2 whole seasons of the Research Works podcast.
2 seasons. Oh, my goodness. Hi, Dana.
Hello, Ash. Here we are. Amazing. Congratulations.
Congratulations to you. Because do you know what 2 seasons means?
What does that mean?
It means that we have spoken to more than 70 incredible, inspiring researchers about their work.
Isn't that amazing? I remember when we first started? And it was just like, we're like, oh, do you think we could do this? And remember how nervous we were?
We were so nervous. You could probably tell if for all of our hardcore long-time listeners, I won't encourage you to go back and listen to the first episode, or maybe do, but you will see we have learned and evolved.
We have.
I feel like we're in our groove.
We are in our groove. Look, I do notice our numbers in terms of people listening. They do tend to go back to the first episode, and I always see that and go, oh, but just keep going.
We're much better now.
Better. But thank you so much for listening. It's been...
And sharing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's been so cool.
Yeah.
And I love that, we've just been able to do this over 2 years, and like that covers so much research and so much ground, and getting the word out there is absolutely such a privilege and such a passion for both of us. So it's really cool.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you for supporting what we do, because we really love doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking forward to doing more. So this is not the end. This is just what we call a wrap-up episode.
Yeah, we like to wrap things up.
We do.
Yeah.
With a pretty bow.
Yeah, and a nice pretty bow. We did something similar before our mid-season break this year, season 2. So please go back and listen to that, because that's a really nice summary of the first half of the season and all of the episodes that encompass that. And today we're going to kind of pick up where we left off there and talk about everything that's happened in the second half of this season.
I love it. And this is where, your proud, amazing qualitative skills comes into play.
I don't know about that.
Oh, it's so good. So all the thematic analysis, it comes into play, and I will give full credit to Ash here, because she's the queen, and I love how you think about things. But we've covered a range across such a diverse area. So I'm interested to see how we pull it all together.
Yeah. We'll do our best. And I think, what we really try and do with these episodes is bring it back to how what we talk about influences what we do practically.
Love it.
And how this research and the evidence that is drawn from this research influences clinical practice, because that's what we're all about.
Yeah, that's right. And I think every day about how we put those things into play every day. And it's not even just in the clients and the patients that you see. I think about a lot of those things for myself, because there's a lot of things that we can draw on, and even just in conversations with your friends, hey, like you just like, oh, have you heard this episode? I think you might like it.
Yes.
Yeah. Really cool.
So yes, today is about connecting all the pieces, putting the pieces of the puzzle together and just reminding everyone about what you can do practically.
Yeah, that's right.
But just because we don't have a guest doesn't mean that we don't have some icebreakers, Dana. We're going to surprise each other with a little icebreaker question today. So we haven't prepped. You don't know what I'm going to ask you.
I have no idea.
I don't know what you're going to ask me.
No, I have no idea. I think I'll work it out in a little bit.
Okay, so let's start
first.
My question.
Okay.
And it's actually not a silly question. It's quite a serious question now that I reflect on it. But the question is, which of your character traits are you the most thankful for?
I don't know what all the actual proper character traits are. They're probably listed somewhere in some sort of article.
That's okay. We can be liberal with our interpretation of character traits.
That's cool. probably compassion, I would say. I think that it is that drives everything that I do. Like, it has its flip side, of course, because you can get too invested sometimes, and you can really get into things that way. But I think that becomes the drive, and I think that drives empathy. And it just, no matter how busy you get, no matter how busy the world gets, I'm just so grateful that that's part of a personality that I don't have to, think about and go, be really nice, Dana.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just a part where you just kind of go, well, actually, think about things that are greater than yourself, because it's so easy in this world to be so wrapped up in your own self. And, we blame all sorts of things in social media for, but inherently we all tend to do that. You think about yourself, and it's that trait, I suppose, and the people I surround myself with tend to have a lot of those traits too. So you're always thinking about each other. Yeah. And in a world that we live in, I'm just so grateful that we have a lot of those people around. So I think that's probably it. But on the flip side, it gets me into a fair bit of trouble. I do have a little bit of a temper. So I definitely, I'm grateful for that temper, because it pulls me out if I need it to. Yeah. So I'm very agreeable. If you go to like what are the big 5 personality things?
Yes.
One of them is agreeableness. I'm very agreeable, which makes it really difficult for me to be in conflict. Yes. But I have a temper. So if I get really fired up about something, it's enough for me to go, boom. Yeah. And I can stand up for myself.
Well, I think that's healthy.
That's healthy.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think, that's probably mine.
I can vouch for that. I think you are an incredibly compassionate, authentic person. So,
thank you. Yeah. And you might occasionally see my temper come out.
Well, I haven't yet, so I must be doing something right.
Well, that's a good question. It's a very deep question,
It is a bit of a deep question, very reflective. I'm sorry to finish the year on that, but I would say that I'm really thankful for my optimism.
Yes. Yeah. You are I would vouch for that, 100%. You're a very optimistic person. I love it.
Yeah. It gets me through a lot of sticky situations.
Yes.
So I'm truly always believing in the best outcome possible.
Yeah. 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 You do. I mean, in the midst of when all your kids were sick for like what seemed like months on end, you're always like, it's turning a corner. It's getting better. I'm like, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's not really, but it is. Yeah.
No, that's true. I really do like that part of and it comes through in everything that you do, Ash.
Oh, thanks, Dana.
That's a really cool one. Well, okay. Well, my question wasn't really that deep.
That's good. I think that's a good thing.
It was more to do with fashion. So I know, again, this is a podcast. So
you fashion podcast.
No. I'd be the last person you'd have on that. But you are always very fashionable.
Oh,
you are 100%. So I would love for you to sort of say, what are your top styling tips?
Okay.
For the summer 2022. You always look so great.
Okay.
So what should we have in our wardrobe? Like if we want to throw something on for summer, like, and we want to look great.
Yes. Okay. I think the key to looking great is feeling great. So you have to be wearing things that you're comfortable in.
Yes.
And you shouldn't force current trends and styles on yourself.
Okay.
If it doesn't feel like it's authentic to you.
Okay.
So I think you can always look really nice if you are wearing something you feel happy and comfortable in.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
That's good. But you always have colour. You always like...
Oh, yeah, and colour. I really like colour. Although I am wearing just a very plain white T-shirt today. Very monochrome today. Yeah. But colour always makes me happy.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, it's really good.
And simple is best. Like just... So here's another.
See,
this is not a fashion tip. This is a practical tip for life.
Okay.
If you're wearing a dress, if you're someone who likes to wear dresses,
yes,
one dress means that's only one thing that you have to choose for the day. Whereas if you're wearing like a top and shorts or a top and pants, then that's more than one thing that you have to choose.
That is so practical.
Yeah,
that is very practical. I do notice you wear a lot of dresses. So
yes, exactly. It's just one thing. It's one decision you have to make for the day.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I felt like that had to come out because yes. So very fashionable.
What's your fashion tip?
Oh gosh, look, my only tip would be to maybe try not to wear the same thing maybe 3 days in a row. I find over summer I wear the same thing all the time because I kind of feel like that's just what it looks like. But, you know, it is the summer holiday, so you do want a little bit of colour and maybe just try to rotate your favourite things throughout the 2 weeks. I'm very fortunate in the sense that where I currently work, like we have a uniform and I absolutely flippin' adore it. I don't have to think about it.
That's so good.
But then when it comes to holidays, I'm completely stuck and I do find myself with a few favourites. But, you know, just maybe expand your favourites to just a few more and then rotate them around and you'll look fresh every day.
Yeah. There are a few, I know you're going on a holiday soon.
I am.
So I have a few hot tips for where you might be able to get some nice summer things where you're going.
Fabulous. Okay. Yeah. We'll chat later.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got our informal fashion and life advice out of the way.
It was very good. It was very good.
Let's talk about the second half of season 2 of the Research Works podcast.
Yes.
And I think when I was going back and looking at the episodes that we did in the second half of the year, and there were quite a few episodes. It was a big season.
It was a big season. Yeah.
There were kind of 3 kind of key themes that came out to me.
Yes.
Without being too qualitative about it. The first one was quite clear.
Yep.
In that both of us and our listeners jumped right into a new topic this season.
We did.
And second half of this season, we learnt a huge amount about language and literacy in young people, didn't we?
We did. That was a huge learning curve, but I loved it. It was so good and it was great that we could do a few episodes in that. But we started it off with Associate Professor Suze Leitão, who was not only just the proud creator of the website, and she was very, very pleased about, but you know, they share so much information on this website. It's just a knowledge translation vehicle. And I've been on there and I find amazing stuff on there all the time.
Yeah. And incredible free resources that anyone can access and
curated.
Use. Yep. It's a beautiful resource. And that episode with Suze for me was an incredible overview of all of the different areas within language and literacy in young people that the work of the group covers.
Yes.
So it's that episode in particular, you know, it's a real signpost for where the evidence sits in that area. And then we managed to dive into a few of those topics in a little bit more detail with some of our other guests.
We did indeed. It was such a great place to start. And I think the first thing, even just before we go into the guests that followed from there, was the fact that I love that Susan said, if you're worried, you just refer and seek support, because I think too many times do people go, oh, you know, not sure about their language. We'll see if they grow out of it.
Yes.
Rather than that, you know, seek some support, because language is just actually so important, you know, communication. And when you enter school life without the main tools there, you can really be set behind, can't you? Yeah.
Yeah. And that gap often is something that continues to broaden.
Yep.
You know, as you go through that formal schooling system. So we covered all things kind of theory, assessment, intervention with Suze, and then we also talked about some of those implications of, you know, not identifying language disorders in young people. We talked about the prevalence within the justice system. We talked about the mental health implications. It was really a really broad episode with a lot of information in there. Yeah,
absolutely. And I love how from there we jumped into talking about developmental language disorder, something that I didn't know very much about before, hey? Like, I mean, we've probably heard different terminologies around it before. And I think it's one of those things when you don't have the right terminology, I think you can be afraid to use it, because I feel like, you know, language is just so important.
Yeah.
And how we say things is so important. So actually having some good vocabulary around things that we might be seeing, it was so important, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like just,
And in terms of the prevalence of DLD as well, you know, we talked about thinking about it in terms of a classroom.
Yep.
The number of children in that classroom who actually do have DLD is quite alarming, isn't it?
It's actually really alarming.
Yeah.
And you think about all the kids that do get left behind and might not actually get enough support. And I love how they brought out in that one, there was no increased risk because you're male. And I feel like that's always been a factor, hasn't it? It's like, oh, he's a boy. And as a result, you know, they might get referred, but the girls don't.
Yes. Yeah.
Or they're a bit shy.
Yes.
I love how they just describe things you might be seeing and the excuses that you might give without realising actually maybe we need to provide that personal support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it comes back to Suze's message about, if there is a concern, seek support.
Absolutely.
You don't have to watch and wait.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the data from the RAIN study where they got a lot of this from was just so incredible, that wealth of information from so many generations now, hasn't it?
Yeah. And we talked about that with Liz Hill and Sam Calder in their episode.
Right.
And they really used that data to try and unpack the functional impact of those language difficulties, didn't they?
Yeah. And I love that they had some great practical things to talk about there in terms of, that the power of just kids growing up in a household where they hear talking, you know, and how important, reading a book is at night, because it's teaching words and it's vocabulary and
just having those conversations
that's right.
with your child. Often child health nurses will say, if you're changing a baby's nappy, just tell them what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they really reiterated that that's such a powerful tool to try and support language development in young children. And I think when they were talking about that, and I think we might have even talked about it in the episode as well, this idea of environmental enrichment and something that is probably familiar to a lot of people working in the early intervention space. It's something that's also applicable in this context.
That's right. It's incredible how, I don't know, it feels like the penny drops sometimes when you realize all these things. You're like, actually this, environmental enrichment, my two favorite words put together, it just describes so many things with regards to healthy development.
Yeah.
And in this context, you might be doing something as simple as talking out loud about what it is that you might be doing if there's no one else there to have a conversation with, or reading a book before going to sleep. That actually is so powerful, and you're already doing so much right there and then. You don't have to engage in so much extra stuff, do you?
No, it's not. It doesn't have to be formalized.
No, that's right.
It's all those kind of day-to-day behaviors.
Yeah.
And, from a clinician's perspective, that is something that you can be working towards within your practice. An enriching environment is so powerful.
Yep. Finding ways that you can have accessible books, finding ways that children can interact, and, the tools that we use in our therapy settings need to be so intentional. And you could be thinking about, their word learning, which really led to Emily Jackson, didn't it, with regards to all things word learning, and Gornapeck. I can't believe I remember that.
The Gornapeck.
Love that episode.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, you need to go back and listen to Emily Jackson's episode, and all will become very clear.
Yes. I'm impressed I remembered. That might just speak to the whole fact that she did talk about memory and, how things go from a short-term to long-term memory when we're learning words. Like, how profound is it when we're learning words for the first time as children? Everything's new, right?
Yeah.
And the process for that. She even talked a little bit about sleep and the fact that sleep is actually so important for helping retention.
Yes, and converting those short-term memories into, working and long-term memory.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, all I can think of is Inside Out, the Pixar films.
I was just thinking about the little balls.
Same.
Yeah.
They go into long-term storage, but it only happens when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful to think about from there as well. She talked about dosage, because they were talking about word learning, and it was over a period of 4 days, wasn't it? And the amount of repetitions was probably only about, I think 24, but when you get up to repetitions way above 40 to 50, that's when you can actually start to remember and to learn. So I think, whilst we try not to have just a hard number to work toward, it just gives you context to think maybe how long something might take and to actually be exposed to
actually
the word.
Saying something 40 times.
Yeah.
That's a lot of exposures, I suppose, if you think about it like that. Yeah.
I need to digress a little bit. I know it sounds a little bit odd, but for many of our listeners, they might have realised, you have kids, Ash. You've got two wonderful children. I don't have kids, but I do have a fur baby, and he's currently 6 months old. And I do take a lot of things we've learnt here with regards to motor learning and word learning and I apply it when I am teaching Frankie stuff. Yeah. And I do realise that actually he does so much better when I'm just talking things through all the time and I have enough repetitions. I actually get out my 40 treats usually, and I make sure I have that over the course of the day, and then he learns this new trick. And I guess the whole point of that is just the consistency element of it. I know they're different. Fur babies are very different to actual children. I do get that.
Both respond well to treats though.
They do indeed. Yeah, a bit of positive reinforcement there. But the role of repetition and language, when you realise from an animal doesn't understand any English whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, I actually I did talk to them about that. I was like, I've applied this to my real life in that setting. Sorry, I do digress.
And well, I think that also, you are creating an enriching environment for Frankie as well in doing that.
Oh, what a lucky boy he is.
What a guy.
Yeah, what a guy. Yep. I've told him to give me a kiss on command. Yes, it is force loved.
So just on that topic of environmental enrichment, because we've touched on it a few times now, I think that was another kind of clear message to me throughout the course of the second half of this season was the power of enriching an environment and setting children up for success, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just children as a whole, right? It's not diagnostic specific. No. It's not clinical population. We're talking about children.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why you see so many campaigns around, in terms of, maybe less time from the TV and maybe more time to the playground or, read a book. And, those things come from that sort of messaging about environmental enrichment.
Yeah. And I think, the first episode after our break with Dr. Kathy Morgan was that was one of the really powerful messages in that conversation with Kathy was, it's the child's environment and how they learn that really makes the difference. And we were talking about that with Kathy in the context of the clinical guidelines discussing the best available evidence for intervention for children with or at risk of cerebral palsy between 0 and 2. But I think that message is applicable beyond that scope as well.
Yeah. I guess what that guideline really showed was in those early ages, there is such significance in being so deliberate about it. Yes, it definitely continues beyond that. But in those first few years of life, because you are trying to create an environment that, where you can support learning and healthy learning, like we spoke a fair bit about, crying and distress, and those things are not good conditions for children to learn when you're distressed. And, there's physiological impacts of that. So, when they talked about raised cortisol levels and, in a background of potentially, children might have pain or irritability, create an environment then is so important to facilitate any learning.
And that distress and upset is a communication of a need because they're not of an age that they can kind of say that out loud at that point. So you do have to take that into consideration with what you're doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't just keep pushing ahead. I think pushing forward when a child's really distressed is not the right way to go about it. And we spoke a bit about this, didn't we, when we sort of said sometimes, that the pressure of doing a home visit or doing a therapy session and the kid's crying and you can't console them, but you're out for a visit, it doesn't mean you need to just keep pushing through because that could be actually quite harmful. Rather, maybe spend some time coaching and supporting the family in other ways is still really, really useful. But, I think that conversation was really great as well because then it really went to that whole task specificity of that too, because environmental enrichment is really task specific, isn't it? Like when you think about it, it's about,
and it's not just about, having an enriching environment. It's about that environment being, utilized in the right context.
That's
and,
right.
We need to ensure that the context that kids are learning in is suited to the goals that they have or their family has.
Yeah.
And it has to be as engaging as possible.
And that engagement isn't just from a motor perspective, which I think is the first thing we often think about, especially when, we're thinking about cerebral palsy. It's motor.
Yeah.
But it's so highly
linked. Do you mean like
cognitive.
Engaging, like that the right muscles are engaged at the right time?
Yeah. And also just being wanting to do something as well. Yeah. We always go, we want them to stand and to walk and do all those things, but really
do they want to?
Yeah, because that's just as powerful. Because if we can build children that want to move, they want to engage, they have an environment they want to interact with, then that's going to be the driving piece because that's all self-generated. It's their own decision that they want to be involved rather than someone else putting their will, I suppose, over them going, you will now stand and you will now walk and you will now interact.
Yes.
That's never as powerful as a person wanting to do that themselves, right?
Active engagement.
That's right.
Yeah, because there's not just motor benefits to that, there's cognitive benefits to that as well.
Yes, yeah. And I love how passionate, Kathy was on this, and it kind of extended, to a lot of previous conversations we had had as well with Leanne Saksushki and Sarah Reedman. The themes are very, they're very consistent now, aren't they?
I think so.
It's how much we can get the child to be engaged with, and it's no longer, I think it's no longer just the opinion. It really is evidence based, and we can incorporate that into our practice. It looks different though, it does look different. You might not have your hands on as much.
Yep.
You might be using your hands to help facilitate something or set someone up, but if you can really take a step back and go, how can I make this environment more engaging so this child wants to move, and they can engage and be active, and therefore get the repetitions in to learn a new skill, to be a bit more independent, hopefully participate as well. Thinking of all those things we can put into it.
Yeah, and I think the idea of task specificity in the context of participation was something that we talked about with Hércules, Professor Hércules Leitch. We learned that, in the context of sport-focused interventions, participation is improved for children with CP when there's as many of those active ingredients of participation included in that intervention as possible. And obviously there's constraints with that in terms of the type of intervention that you're running. But if you can make efforts to include those active ingredients, and there was a beautiful table in his paper about what those active ingredients are. So, you can go back and listen to that episode and read that paper again and really, be thinking about those when if a sport focused intervention is something that you're doing with children, then that's a really nice kind of guidebook for how to include those or what they look like and you to think about how you might include them.
Yeah, I love that. And we often think about task specificity sometimes as just the simple motor tasks. I don't know about you, but I do think that. I go, okay, sit and stand, I guess because I'm a physio, we tend to think of those tasks. But 100% when you're thinking at sport, that task specificity comes into play as well. And I like how you sort of said, look, if it's still like you might be doing an individual session still, but if there's another kid around that, might have a similar goal, and then you can start including some rules and, how you interact with each other, that's an element that you can add into that. It's not just about the child doing something by themselves and thinking about the bigger picture. Yeah. So, I love that.
And I think, one of the things that Hércules did in that paper was I think their inclusion criteria was guided by the family of participation related constructs.
Yes.
And I think that leads us really beautifully into that incredible conversation we had with Professor Christine Imms about
that was so good.
Participation as both a means and an end.
Yep.
And that was a really powerful conversation for me, and I know it was for you as well, Dana.
Oh, gosh. I think I kept saying it through the episode. When I listened back to it, I'm like, Dana, stop saying it. But I did keep saying it. I'm like, every time I talk to Christine, she does leave me thinking really deeply about something. And I did. It was for like a good week after that. I just kept thinking about it.
Yep.
And I love the means rather than ends. I think I've used that since then, every day in my language. It's like no longer looking at it as the end point.
Yeah. And also not when we think about participation, thinking about whether it is attendance or involvement.
Yes.
And yes, a child is, might be showing up to their session every week, but are they actually involved in what they're doing when they're at that session? And I think that comes back to what you were saying before about active engagement and involvement and all of these. I think active is kind of the key word in there, is that they have an active role in what they're doing.
Yeah. It becomes more about the child, the person, than us. Yep. And, that was really reinforced by other guests we've had in the show as well. But really, it's just sticking with this. It's involvement is one of those terms that I think we just need to have in our vocabulary.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I took home and talked about, even within us as a team, is that, when we're writing goals, let's just make sure at least one of the goals that we're writing has the word involvement in it, or a context, just something to make sure everything always points in that direction.
Yeah.
And if that goal hasn't come up from that family or that child, let's coach them through that.
Yeah.
Because I think, yes, we can use the goal setting and go, okay, what are your goals? But we can still coach people to kind of go, all right, well, why do you want to do that? And in what context do you want to do that in? How will this get you more involved in what you want to do? And it just helps people to think about what participation involvement looks like. So I think there's a lot we can do just with our words. And there's a lot we can do, just talking with our families, talking with children during sessions. You can do that, and that can support that thinking.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going down a bit of the wrong track here, but, what I was thinking about is, and one of the things Christine said is, are we making accommodations that are affordable and acceptable for the people that we're working with?
Yeah.
And, are we trying to kind of mold what they want to do into the facilities and the spaces that we have for them to do it in, or are we truly thinking about what it is they want to do and how we can modify things to enable them to do that and achieve that?
That's right. Well, I think that's so perfect, because remember how she said, if we can see ourselves more as teacher, then suddenly everything just looks a little bit different. We're trying to facilitate, and it becomes less about us wanting to achieve the things that we might need to tick off on a milestone box. It's more about, how can we teach this person? And I really thought about the work that I do in Malaysia, for example. We've got, some teams out there, and they don't call their therapists like physio, they call them teacher.
Oh.
And I just think inherently that's just so beautiful, because, here's your teacher teaching you how to put on your shirt so that you can be more independent and you can participate more. Like by just using that terminology, you already shift that a little bit.
Yeah. And it helps, I suppose, facilitate some of that hands-off approach.
Yes.
Like it might be hands-on for a portion, but then, if you're teaching, then there's the implication that at some point you'll be able to do it yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's about you developing the strategies to do that yourself in a way that's meaningful to you.
Yep, I love that. And I think, oh gosh, that reminds me of when I used to teach piano. Like, I don't teach piano by putting my hands on that kid's hands and and playing over their fingers. I actually give them the strategies for them to do it themselves, and that's how they learn. Yeah. And it's just that way of thinking, I suppose. And what I really loved about that episode as well is I guess how it sort of finished. Gosh, it was like a brain explosion, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh God, you probably will summarize it better than me, because I'm going to be bumbling as I talk my way through it. But you know how she was talking about, don't look at the problem that's within the child.
Yeah. Don't look at what's wrong.
Yeah.
Look at
the fix it mentality, right?
Yes. And I think, that point about language, what you've just said, language plays a really important role in involvement. Yeah. And yes, I think as clinicians, often we fall into the trap of identifying a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yes.
This is an impairment. If I fix the impairment, that will improve activity. And, the downstream effect of that is that the person will be able to participate.
Yes.
But actually, you need to be thinking about participation throughout the whole process.
And I was reflecting so much about probably how I was taught, and therefore how I taught in my first few years as a physio, was that we used the ICF because it's a great framework, but we used it to teach, and we would go, okay, so what are the participation restrictions? You list them all down. What are the activity limitations? Unable to stand, unable to walk independently, they can't do this, can't do that. What are the impairments contributing to that? You list them all down, spasticity, reduced muscle strength. Then you go, okay, what's your treatment plan? All right, I'm going to increase muscle strength, I'm going to reduce spasticity, increase muscle length, and therefore they'll be able to sit, they'll be able to stand, and hopefully they'll address their participation. But it's how we were trained. And you do need to still think about those things as a clinician. You need to think broadly and go, what are the contributing factors here? But my intervention needs to be so task specific. What do they want to be able to do? And if we're going to say that there's something wrong that we need to fix so they don't have enough muscle strength, well, actually, let's look at the environment. How can we change that?
Yes.
And you should always balance it out.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't ever just have problems within the child.
The way you've described it there sounds to me like sometimes those constructs within the ICF get treated as a bit of a formula.
Yes.
Like impairment, activity, participation, but really that it's not progressive or chronological necessarily if we take this approach.
Yeah.
It's all kind of working together and creating an environment that enables you to participate whilst perhaps, addressing some of those underlying impairments.
Yep.
And, having a chance to do those activities.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, when we looked at the diagram, the family participation related constructs, one of the things I said was there's no boxes. It's all curvy lines because everything interacts with each other. And it's actually a real mind shift. It goes away from so much of our learning because we need to understand the constructs, right? But when we actually come into the play when working with people, it looks so different. And it will take a little while to shift that around. But I think that the main part about that as well is, if a child has reduced muscle strength, we don't need to address that muscle strength so that we tick the box so that they get to a certain level before they can do an activity and participate. We're actually saying, if we can get them to participate, they'll have an opportunity to increase their muscle strength. Yeah. And in the meantime, they're enjoying life. They're involved.
Yeah.
They're not.
And let's set up an environment that enables them to do the activity and to participate right off the bat. And then things progress from there.
Yeah, that's right. And you can think how powerful they'll be. When you first meet like an 8-month-old, what are 8-month-olds doing? Well, they're moving about the place. They're getting curious. They're trying to explore. So let's try to find a way for them to explore. Yeah. And whether that means, putting them some supportive walking devices so they can be upright because all the other toddlers might be upright as well. They might just be starting to get up. What does that look like? And can they start to engage there?
Yeah. So, one of the takeaways from me in that was, the power of language and our internal language as well as what we're actually saying to people, how we're thinking about things and trying to, be conscious of that and reframe that based on available evidence.
Yes.
But then also how we discuss those things with families is really powerful as well. And I think that was really evident as well in our conversation with Dr. Kyla Smith.
Oh my gosh.
Who was first pediatric dietitian to join us on the show. Another new topic that we managed to unpack a little bit of. I think we've just kind of scraped the surface.
There's more to do there.
There's definitely more to do there. But, the power of language and, the environment of diet culture that surrounds us with, food and healthy eating practices is really powerful. And at the moment is resulting in, a third of adolescents having some form of disordered eating.
Yeah, that was so alarming.
Yeah.
I would have to say that got me thinking deeply for a long time as well, because I think, we can all probably relate to this one.
Yeah.
And when she said a third, I was really shocked to start off with. But when you really started thinking about it, you think about your own language. I felt like it was like my own little therapy session, I was like,
treats.
All the influence. Things that you might say. Yeah. I caught myself saying it so much.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of chocolate in the office at the moment. So now I'm just like, I'll just eat chocolate when I feel like it. I don't need to do anything to deserve it. And I don't need to burn it off straight after.
No.
But that's the language that we've all sort of grown up with. And those biases is then, if we're not careful, we just transmit them to the next generation where actually we want to make sure we can, help children to have a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah. And we talked through some really practical strategies with Kyla about what we can do to set an environment up that leads to a healthy relationship with food. We talked about the division of responsibility. I provide, you decide, making sure that children are comfortable where they're sitting and eating and they don't have to concentrate on, maintaining posture and, all those principles that apply to all children. We're not talking about, a particular clinical population here. This is, principles that apply to all kids who are, learning about eating food or have an established relationship with food.
No, there's so much to think about that one. And I guess just the role, I've heard a lot of people talk about that as well, kind of going, the coercion to finish meals.
Yeah, just one more bite. Then you can have something else.
So lots of great take homes from that one. So definitely go back and listen to that if you haven't yet.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was so grateful for in the second half of this season was just the chance to speak to so many experts on a variety of new topics. We mentioned Dr. Kyla just now, and that whole world of being a pediatric dietitian, but we talked to so many other experts as well about some new areas, some some not, some that were somewhat familiar to us. But, all these principles of task specificity, setting an environment up for success, I think were only highlighted further in these conversations.
Absolutely.
And the first one that comes to mind is Helen Leonard.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and CDKL5 deficiency disorder.
Yes.
We talked a lot about, what we know about this very rare disorder.
Yep.
But one of the things that I really enjoyed about this chat was that we can draw on our knowledge from a lot of other areas to inform how we work with these children.
Yep, that's right.
We talked about the importance of movement, on gut health, and I know that there were lots of light bulbs going off in your head, Dana.
They were
around.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we always say is in these rare conditions, it's not like there's been an RCT that's informed us. You can't. So you don't know. You can't say, whilst there's no evidence in this particular diagnosis, I can't do anything. Well, no, obviously that's not true.
No, it's about drawing on the best available evidence to guide what you're doing clinically.
Yep, exactly. And I think those words are so important. The best available evidence keeps coming up.
Yeah.
So if we have empirical evidence that tells us really sure, international clinical guidelines, and yet you use those best available. But if we're not there yet, you just use the next level. And for this one, what was really clear was, gut health was a big struggle for a lot of kids with CDKL5 deficiency disorder. And so we can draw on the fact that, positional changes can reduce pain, and they can really improve gut motility. And so we can be, making sure we get them up. Respiratory, yeah, absolutely. And then be more active during the day. Can also help from that 24-hour perspective in supporting, bodily rhythms to go to sleep. Like there's things you can apply through there because we are humans and we have a human body.
Yep.
And there are certain things that our body likes to do, and it likes to move in any way it can.
Yeah.
And that can support us with, our circadian rhythms, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a really important message, is that, taking the best available evidence is an evidence-based approach.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be so stiff. I think sometimes people think it's really stiff. Like it has to come from a research paper.
Yes.
But it has to be combined, and that's the whole definition of evidence-based practice, isn't it? It's scientific, clinical expertise, and the lived experience from consumers and what it is that they want.
Yeah. And that's any of these clinical guidelines that we talk about that have been developed, if they've all been developed with a certain standard, like they're meeting NHMRC standards, and those standards say, there is obviously an approach to grading the empirical evidence or the research evidence that exists, but then there's also a process of gathering the other information and evidence that's around and using clinical expertise to really, define how to use that.
That's right. The
in
interpretation
practice.
of it, the actual application of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty much most of our listeners. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're using this information and we're applying it the best way we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we also talked to our colleagues, or our international colleagues, Ginny, Paleg and Roslyn Livingstone, about postural management, and again, drawing on the available evidence to guide what we're doing with postural management for kids. I think in that context, it was GMFCS 4s and 5s.
Yeah. And it's an area that hasn't been heavily studied, yet we know that this is a group of kids that have a lot of needs. They can experience so many difficulties when they can't move. And, if we're looking at supported standing or using a gait trainer or walking frame early on, I loved how they championed that, in terms of looking at overall health, as early as 8 months, we should be getting them up, we should be getting them moving, because that's what their body needs to be doing if you're thinking about other children at that age as well.
Yeah.
Love how passionate they were about that.
Yes. Yeah. That was an incredible episode.
It was fun.
And we had some other international visitors, face-to-face visitors, all the way from Belgium.
Yes, that's right.
Lize Mailleux and Lize Kleeren.
The Lises.
Yeah, the Lises, who really brought together, again, the current available evidence and anatomical knowledge, and talk to us about really practical evidence-based strategies to support children with somatosensory challenges. And we know that, there are a large proportion of children with CP who have somatosensory challenges. There's not a huge amount of evidence out there at the moment, but I think they did a really nice job of bringing what is available together to give listeners some really practical strategies to.
And it's so important, right? Because they were talking about how somatosensation is one of the greatest predictors of motor outcomes.
Yeah.
So if you're doing an intervention that's very motor-based, which often they really are, and you're not getting the outcomes that you're hoping for, well, actually maybe we need to go back and look at whether we're task-specific enough, and maybe we need to be addressing things from a somatosensation perspective. And their message was always assess, like do something to assess somatosensation for that to then guide your treatment. But really exciting things coming from there as well, isn't there?
Yeah. And then we also spoke to Professor Veronique Bach and our friend of the show, Dr. Suze McCabe, about, really harnessing the body's physiology and thermoregulation to master sleep.
Oh, that was so great.
Yeah.
I have not stopped thinking about that one either. That was quite a recent one. I've been thinking about my circadian rhythms a fair bit, trying to go to bed at the most consistent time possible.
Yeah.
But this is the role. Like, I think I have known previously that temperature regulation is really important, but oh my goodness, it is the instigator for sleep.
Yes.
Like, it's all these temperature changes that happen in our body that sets the body off into its pattern, its circadian rhythms of when it needs to go to sleep. And therein lies an opportunity for us as therapists to influence that to support better sleep.
Yeah.
That felt like a light bulb moment for me.
100%. And, we talked about just, again, assessment being really important and just, keeping note of what happens throughout the day and when it happens and looking at how you can harness the body's rhythms or how you can, how you can support changes in thermoregulation and physiology to either like maintain the body's natural rhythm or get it back to its natural rhythm.
Yep. And the part that the things that help you to even instigate sleep, like bath times and thinking about when that might be really useful for kids to have their bath and playing around with that a little bit because we know that process can help children get to sleep. And it's not just the routine part of it, which was probably what I always thought it was. Actually, it was probably the instigator of temperature changes that set that body off. And spicy food. I'm not sure how many kids will enjoy spicy food before they go to sleep, but I'll try it.
I certainly do,
No, that was a really good one. It was great to have that expertise from that real, physiology perspective, like how the body actually works.
Yeah.
And the application of that came beautifully through Sue.
Yeah. 100%. So, I think, we learned a lot about the importance of assessment as always and knowing, what you're measuring, why you're measuring it, what you're trying to achieve with measurement. We talked about that right at the start with Kathy. We talked about it with Suze in the context of language and, that's a really rich theme that's come through everything that we've discussed this season. Environmental enrichment and task specificity and how important those things are and really using the best available evidence to guide clinical practice.
That was a beautiful summary, Ash. Great job. Really good. And I think that, we're always learning, but these themes really just point us in the direction of where research is headed and things that we are starting to really know. And so you can really confidently talk to families about this. You can really confidently apply this in your practice and just know that we're doing the best we can. We're applying the best available evidence to improve quality of life for so many of our children and their families. And ultimately that's why we're here, right?
100%.
So what a season it has been.
Yeah, we absolutely loved having all of these discussions with our guests, with you, our listeners. We hope you find a lot of takeaways for you, for the families that you work with, maybe even for you and your family as well. Right. I think we certainly have. So, as always, we're so grateful to the researchers who took time out of their busy schedules to talk with us and share what they've learned with us and with you as our listeners. And we can't wait to share more with you next season.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have such a great Christmas and festive season, everyone. Plenty of time to catch up on all the 70 episodes that we have now. But we will be back for our third season. We already have some incredible researchers lined up. I've already got them lined up in our diaries, haven't we?
We do. We're excited to share them with you in the new year.
Yeah. So take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of this journey with us. And talk to you again soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.